Egypt has some of the most fascinating and yet mysterious history of all time. It's so fascinating that there's a ton of Roblox games about it. Like for example, the Roblox game called Ancient Egypt. Yeah, there's like a whole famous TikTok video about this. Y'all weren't lying about how brutal this game is. Yeah, it's just them like farming for their lives. And I'm not gonna lie, the game is actually really fun. You pretty much just start off as a peasant and have to work your way up. Like, what is going on here? Is there gonna be like a war or something? Should I be hiding? I'm attend to my fields. So yeah, once you have enough money, you can consider yourself to be a citizen. Look, I got abs now. But yeah, this whole game got me thinking as to how fascinating Egypt actually was. Like, Egypt actually invented papyrus and hieroglyphics, essentially inventing writing. They even were the ones that created the whole 365-day-a-year calendar. And it was also Egypt that we found the first woven dress ever made, which is actually over 5,000 years old and considered to be the world's oldest piece of woven clothing. And it actually got me thinking even more. What other fascinating truths are about Egypt? Who are all these gods that they once worshipped? And how did they actually used to sound like? Well, that question can actually be answered because researchers actually got a real-life mummy and used a 3D printer to replicate their vocal cords, and they are able to figure out how it sounded like. Yeah, that's literally it. That's all they got so far. But now what about the ancient pyramids? How exactly were these giant monuments built? Especially with a ton of them existing more than 7,000 years ago. Well, this is where it gets really weird because a lot of people believe it was either aliens or giant beings that helped the Egyptians create the pyramids. I mean, taking a look at the Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, each one of those blocks weighed around 2.5 to 15 tons. So were giants actually used for the inventions of these pyramids? Or was it some otherworldly beings? I mean, honestly, this looks kind of terrifying. I would hate for this to be true. No, the people who worked on these pyramids were actually very skilled and talented workers, not only in strength, but also in mathematics. They would drag around these massive stone blocks, and each time they went up in the pyramids, they would create these ramps or sledges with water poured on the sand to reduce the friction of the limestone blocks being lifted up. Honestly, for a lot of these pyramids being 7,000 years old, these guys were very intelligent. But now what about the ancient Sphinx? One of the oldest monumental sculptures that is estimated to be around 4,500 years old. There's a lot of mysteries surrounding this Sphinx. One of the biggest ones is what happened to its nose. And while we don't exactly have a legit answer, we have a few possible theories.
The broken Sphinx nose refers to the missing nose of the Great Sphinx of Giza.
Yep, that's the one.
An ancient limestone statue near the Giza pyramids in Egypt. The Sphinx, with the body of a lion and the head of a pharaoh, is one of the most iconic monuments in the world. The nose, which was approximately 1 meter long, was broken off for reasons that remain unclear.
Jeez, that thing was huge.
Various theories suggest that it was deliberately vandalized, with the most popular but unproven theory attributing the damage to a Sufi Muslim named Muhammad Saim al-Dar in the 14th century, who defaced it out of iconoclastic zeal. Other theories suggest Napoleonic troops or British soldiers damaged it.
Wait,
However,
Napoleon himself?
Evidence for these claims
he was
is
alive
lacking.
during this time?
The exact cause remains a subject of historical debate, but the loss of the nose has become a symbol of the Sphinx's enduring mystery and the passage of time.
Yeah, and by the way, in case you're curious, the Sphinx is about 240 feet tall, so this thing was massive. But yeah, I do believe it was that person, Muhammad Saim, who removed the Sphinx's nose after protesting against Egyptian peasants who were making offerings to the Sphinx, because many of the locals actually believed that this thing had supernatural powers, and this made him angry, so he destroyed the nose. But now, it wasn't the craziest thing to believe that certain sculptures had supernatural powers, because this was many of ancient Egypt's beliefs. Also, if you're curious as to what the Sphinx's face actually was, it is believed to be the Egyptian pharaoh Khafre's face, which he ruled around 2500 BCE. But now we move on to the topic of mummies. See, we all know the cartoon version of mummies. They're restless spirits who awaken after being disrupted from their slumber, and they're all covered in gauze. But the fascinating thing about this is that a lot of those cartoons and movies are actually based on real life history. Like, even in this Roblox game, there's depictions of the whole mummification process, which yes, did actually happen. But why? Why were they wrapped in all these gauze? Well, that's because they believed that after death, souls journeyed to the underworld, a dark and dangerous realm full of of demons and trials, and the soul had to pass through these gates and avoid being attacked by dangerous creatures like Amit, the soul-eating monster who had the head of a crocodile and the body of a lion. And so wrapping these bodies in a clean state, they believed it made it easier for the soul to journey more peacefully. But now, as to how the mummification process started, well, let's take a look here.
First of all, organs such as the brain and lungs were removed from the body.
Ew.
Then they were placed in special containers called canopic jars.
Yeah, these jars actually do exist.
Next, the body was covered in natron salt for several days to dry it out. The inside of the body was then filled with linen, sawdust, and sweet-smelling herbs. Now the body was ready to be carefully wrapped in linen. Amulets were placed within the wrapping to help with the journey into the afterlife.
Yeah, also speaking on that, whenever an Egyptian pharaoh died, it was common for their slaves, pets, wives to all be buried along with them. Yes, even though they were still alive.
A mask was placed over the face. Then, a priest wearing a mask of the god Anubis would say prayers over the body.
Yeah, we're gonna take a look at Anubis in a little bit.
The body was placed into a sarcophagus, and then into another sarcophagus, before eventually being placed inside a coffin.
Man, that's like very well protected. But yeah, it is true. There is also this video here where a group of people unravel a sarcophagus. But now in doing this, many people were angered by these people disrupting their peace. Many people speculate and even joke around on those that open up these coffins, saying that all these archaeologists are now cursed. And that's heavily depicted in movies and cartoons, but there actually is some truth to a lot of this. Take a look at this video.
In 1922, the tomb of King Tut had been unearthed after over 3,000 years. And with the opening of the tomb came a curse of death with it. The man who financed the tomb's opening was dead only 3 months after King Tut's mummified body was removed from his burial site. This man had gotten bit by a mosquito while in Egypt, and one day while shaving his face, he reopened the mosquito bite. This led to blood poisoning that would claim the very first victim of the so-called Pharaoh's curse.
Oh, jeez.
His half-brother who had visited the tomb ultimately died of the same cause. Another man hosted a dinner party at his home in Baltimore, where he was showing his friends the items he had collected from King Tut's tomb. 30 minutes after his guests had left for the evening, his house suddenly went up in flames. He could have escaped the fire, but in desperation to save the manuscript he had been working on, he went back inside and never came out. The name of the manuscript he was trying to save? The Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Oh yeah, by the way, the Book of the Dead is actually real. Yeah, this is an actual sheet from the Book of the Dead, and the text was often used as a guide for those that were dead on their journey to the afterlife. Yeah, and even in the long form version of the Book of the Dead, there were spells and passages from the text. Even inside King Tut's golden mask, there was inscriptions from the actual Book of the Dead written on it.
Another man unalived himself, but not before writing a note that said, "I have succumbed to a curse which forces me to disappear."
Oh, jeez.
The message was written in his own blood.
Yeah, again, a lot of this is actually true. Now, it could be a large coincidence, but there were a lot of ancient Egyptian artifacts and statues that would have some inscriptions threatening death or curses upon anyone who dared to enter. And yes, many of these curses and inscriptions were found in King Tut's tomb. Which, by the way, did you know that he died when he was only 18 or 19 years old? But now, if scary texts weren't enough, then there'd be the fear of booby traps. See, to prevent tomb robbers from disrupting the resting place of the dead and stealing their valuables, tombs were sometimes sealed with hidden passages, complex mazes, or secret doors. Some tombs even having mechanics that could trigger tombs to be sealed off or even opened. Again, these guys were very smart. But what about booby traps like darts, poison gases, or pitfall traps? Were all those actually real? Not really. Those are more exaggerated and not actually real. But now we look into Anubis, the jackal-headed god that could be seen in a lot of different Egyptian artifacts and statues, because Anubis was the god of mummification and the protector of graves. His role was to guide the souls in the afterlife, but also judge whether the souls were worthy of passing into the afterlife. Yeah, and even in Roblox, there used to be like a whole Anubis cult that occurred. Like, this person had a Roblox game called Zero, and in the description of this game, there were coordinates that when you look them up on Google Maps, it would take you to this gated area where if you look behind it, there'd be this whole Egyptian statue. Yeah, someone actually made like a fascinating fascinating TikTok video on like all the ancient Egyptian gods. Like there was Amun, god of creation and wind, Anubis, god of the afterlife, Ra, the sun god, Horus, god of the sky, Osiris, god of the afterlife and resurrection, Bastet, goddess of home and protection. Yeah, Bastet is actually another very popular one. She was typically seen to be a cat-headed woman, and actually because of this goddess, ancient Egyptians would actually see cats as a sacred animal. Like to them, cats were considered to bring good luck and protection. I mean, it is true, cats are pretty cute. But now, what about Cleopatra? Because there's a ton of Roblox games about her. Like this one's literally just worshipping her. I mean, I'm not sure why her name is called Noob, but there are many things as to what makes Cleopatra so famous. Like one of the big ones is she was literally the last pharaoh to ever exist. But not only that, she was even married to Julius Caesar and then later on Mark Antony. Yet there's also accounts that she was obsessed with poisons. She would test different poisons on prisoners to see what was most effective. Honestly, both strange and terrifying at the same time. There's still a lot more facts that we're learning about ancient Egypt to this day. But yeah, if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.